Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host, Allison K. Dagney, and I'm so happy that you're here with me today. I have another great episode to share with you. For those of you who don't know me, I am a survivor of 20 years of emotional abuse. I escaped my marriage, got a divorce, and began my healing journey. And part of that was learning how to reprogram my subconscious mind for greater healing. And that's why I'm here today to share all of this with you. So let's get started. Now, today we're going to be talking about who am I without my pain? And this is a tough topic because one thing I see in a lot of my clients is this resistance to let go because of a fear of not knowing who they are without that. And I can relate to this because, like I said, 20 years of this that I had been carrying. And when I got out of that marriage, I was 38 years old. I'm now 45. And it's kind of, like to put it lightly, it's kind of difficult to really know who you are after all of that. You have literally immersed yourself in this identity of who you once were. So letting go of your trauma, letting go of who you used to be can be very scary. So we're going to talk about that today. So this episode is really for anybody who's found themselves working really hard to heal, who has tried all the things, who've done all the right things, everything people have suggested. Read this book, check out this podcast, go to this yoga class, do some breath work, right? All these things, but yet secretly doesn't know why they can't heal or why they can't move on, but subconsciously may have something running the show. And I'm going to talk about what that is. Here's the thing. Sometimes the very thing that we really, really want to release, that we really want to let go of, is also what's been holding our identity together. Okay? So you can see there's this, disconnect here because I want to let go of it, but it's really what's holding me together. Okay? So there is a way through this, and I'm going to talk you through that today. Now, why does our pain become our identity? Let's talk about that for a minute, because trauma survivors really a lot of times will cling to the story of their pain. And I remember this so well. When I first got out of my emotionally abusive marriage and I realized that I was being emotionally abused, I wanted to tell everybody, anybody who would listen. And I remember going to get my car serviced one time, and there was a man there, and he was, I don't know, he was probably like 65 years old or something. We were both waiting in line, and I literally just started telling him about my abusive ex. Like, he probably was like, lady, like, why are you telling me this? Like, I don't know you. Never met the guy. And I just started telling my story. And it was the story of me as the victim, right? But what was happening here is it was giving meaning to my struggle. It was helping me feel seen and feel validated. And when I had a story like this, it even allowed me to be part of something bigger, part of a community of other survivors, a part of other people who'd been victimized the same way. And that makes you feel a lot less alone. So I want you to know, first and foremost, that this is not a bad thing. This is not something to be ashamed of. It's a survival strategy, right? You're clinging to the story because, number one, it identifies your struggle. It helps you feel seen and validated, and oftentimes helps you feel a lot less alone. I mean, believe me, I had a story. I told the story in my first memoir and my second memoir, right? So I'm not saying we don't need to have a story, okay? Because we all do. And stories actually help people heal. I know my stories have helped many of you heal, and a lot of my readers heal. It's the clinging to the story of your pain instead of writing a new story of your power. That's the key, okay? Which one is for you? Now, let's dive into the subconscious mind and the reasons that we hold on to this pain. Now, many of you've heard of like limiting beliefs and subconscious blocks and things like that, right? Well, anything that you believe, anything that you consciously are aware of that you believe, right, is part of your programming. Okay, it's part of what you've been made to believe, you've been taught, you've been brought up with, you've been conditioned with, or experienced as part of your traumas or things like that, right? Those are things that you know, like lying is bad and cheating is wrong and people should be nice, right? Those are part of your core belief systems. But what most people don't realize is that there are subconscious beliefs at play that we aren't fully aware of that are happening at all. They're just so automatic that we don't even consider them. So if you've listened to my podcast episode before and you've, gone down way back to the kind of the very first episodes, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. The subconscious mind is a deep well. It is like the area of an iceberg that's under the water, right? And that only that tip of the iceberg is the top part that you're aware of. The stuff underneath is what you're not aware of. So when we talk about limiting beliefs and subconscious blocks, a lot of times those are the things that we don't know about and we aren't consciously aware of. So we're holding on to our pain really without even knowing why, okay? But you have to remember also, this is important, that your subconscious beliefs, the things that are, is running the show in the background of your mind that you don't even know, are what create your emotional state of being, okay? You don't just have emotions that come out of nowhere. The emotions are created by the subconscious beliefs, the blocks and the limiting beliefs that are in there. That's what's creating your emotions, because often what happens is the subconscious beliefs are disagreeing or in misalignment with reality. Okay, so if you believe people shouldn't lie, yet people do lie and people are lying and you're experiencing people lying, your emotions start to bubble up, right? You're angry, you're upset, whatever that might be, because your subconscious is disagreeing with reality. Okay? Reality is what reality is. We can't change reality. We can't change other people. We can only change how we think and what we believe. That's where the power is. That's where the power of healing is, that most people aren't aware of. So I'm glad you're listening. Now, let's talk about subconscious blocks, for instance, okay? So if you, let's say, have a fear of not knowing who you are without the struggle, right? You're going to unconsciously hold on to the pain and hold on to those old stories, because in your mind, your trauma wants to protect you, right? Your brain wants to protect you. Your trauma comes up as a reminder in your current situation, whatever that might be, like it's triggered, okay? But your brain is trying to protect you. So if in your mind, you're subconsciously thinking, I have to have this story and this struggle, otherwise I won't know who I am. Well, that fear of not knowing who you are is going to be front and center. So you're going to hold on to the struggle, the story, and the trauma to avoid the fear. Okay? I hope this is making sense. I'll give you some more examples. For someone who has been in an emotionally abusive relationship, often their whole lives are wrapped up in the abuser, right? What the abuser wanted, the hobbies of the abuser, the things the abuser liked to do, right? All of your interests, your hobbies, your needs are taking a back seat. Where they like to go, what they like to do, right? That's prioritized. And you do it because you don't want to get in trouble or abused more, criticized, whatever that might be, okay? So if that is your situation, or you've been in a situation like that, and you've absorbed all of these things as part of your identity, then you might hold on to this story of being a victim of these painful memories. You might be hanging on to that because you don't know what you like. You don't know where you want to go. You don't even know what you want to eat for dinner. You can't decide anything, right? That's a reality for people who have been emotionally abused. So the scary part is letting go of what you know for something you don't know. Because the unknown and the unfamiliar is way more terrifying than just clinging to what you do know. Right? I mean, I used to even convince myself that I liked certain things that my abuser liked, even when I didn't really like those things. And then I carried those even beyond the divorce. And until I started really questioning, like, is this something I would choose? Do I really like this? Is this something I want to do? Or is this just part of the brainwashing that I went under and part of the, way that I tried to keep myself safe? So part of the fear for me, and maybe you too, would be now I have to actually figure out what I like. And if I do that, then maybe other people will judge me, or maybe other people will think that I'm weird, or other people won't like me, right? Because it's new and you're not used to having that kind of autonomy. You're not used to having that kind of freedom to decide and be yourself and say what you like and what you enjoy. So we might, again, and I know this might not make sense, but it is a pattern of your subconscious mind to just hold on to this, pain and clinging to the story, because it keeps you from having to face the unknown, or face potential rejection, or face criticism or ridicule, right? Because it's safer. Like, I know these things, I'm familiar with these things, I like these things, even though you might not. Right? This is all part of like untangling the mess of emotional abuse. You know what this is like? This is like living in a house that you hate. You hate the house, it's falling apart, you hate the colors, you hate the carpeting and the decorations, like you just don't like it, but it's the only house you've ever known. So leaving that house or selling that house, right, feels scary, especially if it's the only house you've ever known. Even though you know that there's something better out there, even though you know there's something more free waiting for you, right? A lot of times we cling to what we know, we cling to that old trauma, we cling to the old stories because it's familiar. I don't like to use the word comfortable because often it's not comfortable, it's just what we're used to. So the subconscious mind will be filled with stories, it will be filled with beliefs, it will be filled with all these programs that will go unchecked unless you check them. And if they are left unchecked, they cannot be resolved. You have to uncover what it is that's driving how you feel and driving your behaviors. Okay, so if you're like, well, I don't know who I am without my story, I don't know who I am without this pain, right? Letting go of that trauma as your identity is so important, because you are not your trauma. You are not what happened to you. You are so much more than that. You're so much bigger, and you have so much more to offer the world than the story of your pain. Even I remember when I was titling my book, When Tears Leave Scars, and the subtitle is A True Story of Triumph Over Emotional Abuse. And that's the key part, right? It's not just when tears leave scars. No, it's the triumphant aspect, right? Because yeah, you can have that story, but that is not how my story is going to end. And I don't know about you, but I'd venture to say you don't want your story to end that way either. You don't want that to be the ending of your story, that it can be so much better than that. So I just want to keep reminding you that there are all kinds of subconscious reasons that we hold on to our pain that you may not be aware of. And doing some self-reflection, asking yourself some really difficult questions, working with someone like a coach or a therapist to help you figure out what it is that could be blocking you, that could be keeping you from stepping into your true identity when you don't know who you are without that pain. That's going to be key. Okay? I wanted to share with you that a lot of times in my free calls that I have, or even my clients when we're having our coaching calls, they'll be talking about something and their emotions and their thoughts, and I know I'm not making sense, and I know this probably doesn't make sense to you, when they're, talking about wanting to heal, but they're also like not sure who they are without the pain. I always can tell. I always know. I don't know how. I don't know if this is just a gift of mine. I don't know where this comes from, but I'm really good at reading between the lines. So I had a woman the other day who was talking to me about something that she'd been struggling with in her relationship. And I remember immediately, like as she was, in her words, rambling, and I was like, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. She was talking about all kinds of different things, and it wasn't in super linear fashion, but it didn't matter to me because all I took away from it was that she was struggling with boundaries. And I said that. And I said, no, it makes complete sense of what you're saying. It sounds like what you're talking about is needing to have better boundaries. And her eyes widened and she was like, oh my gosh, yes, you're right. That's exactly right. She wasn't able to verbalize it, but I could hear it in her words. And I think partly too, because I deal with so many people who struggle with these kinds of things, that I recognize it. I know it. And I recognize it because I used to be there too. So I'm telling you this because it's very similar to how the subconscious is when you're talking about the things that you don't even know why you do what you do. You don't even know why you feel what you feel. I have training in the subconscious mind. I have a certification in subconscious healing from the Thoughtwork Institute, and that training helps me identify your subconscious beliefs. A lot of people don't even know what a subconscious belief is, but truly it's just any thought that isn't 100% true for 100% of people 100% of the time. So at any given time when I'm talking to anybody, if it's my kids, if it's a client, if it's a friend and they're venting or they're upset about something, I can hear their beliefs. I know exactly what they are. And I can do that for you too. Now let's talk about really quick signs that you might be tied to your pain identity. So you might recognize this for yourself. Like, yeah, I know. I tell my story all the time and I'm constantly complaining about it. Maybe you've been out for 10 years and you're still telling the story. You're still talking about your ex and how horrible they are, right? All these things. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just telling you, this is something that can keep you stuck. This is something that can keep you from moving forward in your healing journey. And there's a reason you don't want to stop. Okay? It's not your fault. It's something embedded in your subconscious that just needs to be rewired, and that's fine. So if you say, you know what, I realize that I do this now that you're saying it, and I do want to free myself from it. I don't want to be tied to this person. I don't want to be tied to the pain and the struggle and all these things. So let's talk about some of these signs, okay? Number one is when you either always lead the conversation with your trauma story, or it's one of the very very first few things that you talk about when you're talking to anybody. It could be a complete stranger. It could be somebody you know very well. It could be even dropping in little things about it to get that conversation started, right? If you're feeling like that urge to bring it up, if you're feeling like that urge to talk about it to people who are just your friends or coworkers or whomever, right? And I'm talking about, like, this is probably more geared for people who have been out of their abusive relationships for like a year, because I really think that in that first year we are healing using our stories and needing to tell the story, right? I mean, I hate to put even a time frame on it, but I do think that if this is something that is repeated continually over and over and over and over and over again, what you're actually doing is you're reinforcing the pain. You're reinforcing that in your subconscious mind. So yes, there is a space for, and a time for, and a place for telling your story and healing. And that is very, very healing. I know, again, because I wrote 2 books about it, okay? So I'm not saying you shouldn't tell your trauma story. I'm just saying if you find that you are constantly doing this well beyond the breakup, well beyond the divorce, right? And you're always talking about it and bringing it up, then it could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be a sign that you're tying your identity to your pain. But it also could be just the healing aspect. Okay, so please don't get me wrong here. I do know that there's a place for people to, and a need to express themselves and tell their stories, okay? It's not just about telling the story though. Here's the thing. It's about, like I said, what came after that? What are you doing with it? How are you healing from it, right? If it's just a reinforcement of the negativity and all the bad things that happened to you and how you were a victim, right? Were being the operative word, how you were a victim, right? And you just keep repeating that, then I'm here to tell you in the most gentle way possible, that is keeping you stuck, okay? And I'm not telling you have to let go of your story. You do not. You do not have to let go of it. But just consider if this is something you want to stay in or move past. That's it. All right? The second thing is if you, okay, this is going to be hard to explain, but I'm going to try my best. If you can't imagine your life without triggers, without chaos, without drama, and if you try to imagine it and you just feel like either uncomfortable or like really unsure or that's impossible, right? This could be a sign that you are tying your pain to your identity. Okay? If you have lived a life of chaos, drama, trauma, heartache, pain, triggers, all the things, right? It's going to be really hard for you to imagine anything else. That's what you're used to. Again, it's your familiarity. And your body recognizes that and knows what it is, and it knows how to handle it. Your nervous system will kick in, fight or flight responses, fawn, freeze, whatever, right? And your body's like, cool, I know how to deal with this. The unknown is a scary place to be for your body and your mind, okay? So if you're feeling like, ooh, like, I don't even know what that looks like. My life could never be that peaceful. I could never experience this, right? There could be something happening here where you're tying your identity to this pain. The third one is if you think that, let's say you are in a new friend group or you're in a new relationship and the person that you're with seems a little boring, seems a little lack of excitement, right? This could be you just, again, thinking about how you're familiar in the chaos and the trauma and the drama. And so anything else that's not that seems either empty or boring or, really vanilla, whatever, however you want to call it, right? And then to top that off, wondering if you would be that way. Maybe people wouldn't like me because I'm boring, I'm empty, I'm too vanilla. If I don't have these wounds, I don't have a story, I don't have these dramas, I don't have these things, like, I don't know who I am. People aren't going to know me. People aren't going to like me. That could be something, right? And I'm just going through a lot of these just to kind of try to hit all the angles because it's going to be different for everyone, right? So you might be like, no, that doesn't sound like me, but maybe this one does, okay? So if you are thinking about life being boring or empty, or you being boring or empty without these stories, without these wounds, then this could be a sign that you tie your pain to your identity or suffering to who you really are. But that's not, I have to remind you, it's not who you are. It's just part of the story that you had, that you lived. Another one, so the fourth one is feeling guilty for outgrowing your pain while other people are still suffering. Okay, so this would be like, let's say that you grew up in an abusive family and you had some siblings and everybody was totally traumatized from, narcissistic mom, abusive parent, dad was absent, whatever that was, right? And you've done some healing work and you can see yourself growing, but then you kind of pull back because you're like, oh, like I can't do this because I feel bad because other people are still suffering. This happens to people who are overweight sometimes, where they are in a family of people who are overweight, and then they might start going on to like a health journey and they eat healthy, they start working out, and then the people who are closest to them, family members or whatever, who aren't on that same health journey, might say things to them, might discourage them from their own wounding, right? From their own subconscious patterns. But what can often happen is that person starts feeling guilty. And then they start like, okay, I'll just have one of those, with you, or yeah, I'll go out and eat with you, or whatever, right? It could be any addiction. It doesn't have to be weight loss. It could be food addictions. It could be alcohol addictions, like different things like that. Because what happens is you start feeling guilty for outgrowing these things, right? So you might experience it too. Like if you notice that your siblings in that family, you're healing, you're outgrowing the pain, but they're still suffering and they're still struggling, right? If you feel guilty about that and you find yourself maybe pulling back into old patterns or old habits or things like that, you might still be tying your pain to your identity. And then the last one that I have here, the fifth one, is feeling unsafe to be successful, to have joy, to have peace, to have happiness. Because a lot of times when you've been emotionally abused, you weren't allowed to do those things. Your emotions were snuffed or stuffed. You weren't allowed to express yourself. You weren't allowed to be excited or have fun or anything like that. So if that feels unsafe to you, right, of course you would resist being happy, being successful, being joyful. You would resist that, not consciously, but unconsciously, because it doesn't feel safe. Your body's going to reject that. This does not feel good to me. If I have joy, if I have success, if I lose weight, if I heal, if I this, whatever, right? A lot of times this happens to people, they'll backslide on whatever it is they're trying to do because it starts feeling scary. It starts feeling unsafe to step into that version of themselves. So you might even have experienced this where you're doing all the things, you're healing, you're doing all the stuff, and then you all of a sudden, like, you go back to your old ways. And you're like, why? I can't stick to anything. I can't keep up these habits. And, I do something for, a few months and then I fall back down, right? It's not your fault. It's because your body goes, this is not safe. It recognizes this is new and it thinks it's not safe. It is safe, but your body doesn't recognize it that way because it's living in the past. It's living in those old trauma experiences. So we got to get your body to feel safe in these experiences. We've got to get you to realize that there is safety in joy. There is safety in excitement. There is safety in success. There is safety in healing, right? Even though your body wants to pull you back, it's yanking you and it's saying, nope, 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 nope. This is uncomfortable. This feels unsafe to me. Okay, so all these are different ways that, your subconscious mind will come in and try to wreck you. And the thing is, if you get to your subconscious mind and you change the programs, it can't wreck you because it's doing what you're telling it to, right? It's only doing what it's been programmed to do right now. So that's the important piece here, to learn, wait a second, I don't have to operate on these old programs. I can actually get into my subconscious mind and reprogram it so that it doesn't sabotage me, so that it doesn't cause these uncomfortable feelings or these feelings of guilt or always like feeling the need to share my story for years on end, right? That keep me not only tied to my pain, but stuck. Can't move forward, can't heal. A lot of people don't realize this is the reason you can't move forward, you can't heal. You can move forward, you can heal, but you got to start on a deeper level. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a couple things that I do in my coaching programs with people. I love to look at astrology and human design. And the reason why I like to look at astrology is because your astrology chart shows your gifts, your potential. It shows themes about your soul beyond your trauma, right? Your trauma could color your experience. It can influence things, but it's not the whole story. There's so much more to it. And I've been studying mine for a while, and it is so eye-opening. It is so enlightening. The human design aspect, which comes in part from astrology, but there's a lot of other pieces to it too. If you're not familiar with human design, I'd highly encourage you to go out onto a website and run your human design chart and then get the insights for yourself. Usually they're just free on people's websites and you can just plug in your information. But your human design shows you how you're meant to live in this world, how you're meant to best express yourself, not how everybody tells you that you should. And it's not about survival either, right? It's about really living. Like, what's the best way for you? Because it's going to be different for everyone. So, for example, generators of the 5 types, generators makes up, 67% of the population or something like that. I'm a generator. But generators really excel and shine when they're doing things that make them happy and that light them up. And so if you're not a generator, you're trying to do things that way, it might not fit for you, right? It's going to be different for everyone. So I like to infuse these things into my healing programs because what it does is it shines a light on who you're really meant to be and how you're really meant to operate, and it gives you that permission to do that. So we work through the subconscious, we work through the soul, we're working through the body with somatic stuff, and the subconscious part, we're rewiring your brain to allow your true self to come forth. Because the thing that's happened is you were a blank slate when you were born. And all these things came and happened to you and covered all that up. So my role is to get that stuff up to the surface and get it out of the way so that you can be your true self, the person you were born to be. Okay? Now, one of the other things that I would love for you to do, and I will actually put these in the show notes below so that you can grab them if you want. But I would love you to reflect on these questions, these journal prompts. And the way I like to journal is to put some relaxing music on, something that doesn't have words, something that's just either like symphony, piano, rain sounds, nature sounds, water, whatever. Theta brainwaves, you choose, whatever you want, right? To get really relaxed and then write like a stream of consciousness. Just let the words come out. Don't filter, don't edit, don't judge it. Just let it come out. Here are the 4 prompts. And like I said, I'll put these in the show notes. If I no longer felt pain, what would I create? Number 1. What parts of me have been waiting for freedom? Okay, what parts of me have been waiting for freedom? Because there are aspects of you that you haven't tapped into yet. 3, who do I become when I'm safe? So when I'm feeling really safe, who am I? Think about somebody you're around when you feel safe. Think about if you're alone and you feel safe. Think about in environments that you feel safe. Who do you become then? And then the last one is, what would my day look like if I didn't have to manage triggers? If you didn't have to be hypervigilant, if you didn't have to be worried about the next shoe to drop, what would your day look like then? And paint a really beautiful picture of it. Okay? Because what this is doing is this is helping you see who you really could be, who you're meant to be without that story, who you're meant to be without the pain. And let's just throw a bonus question in there. Who am I without this story? This is a Byron Katie question, if you're familiar with Byron Katie. She says this all the time. Who am I without my story? Who would you be without the story? That is a really profound question, because a lot of people are like, I don't know. But I'd really encourage you to dig deep. Dig deep. Try to find it. All right, now, how do you start letting go of your pain identity? Okay, if you have a pen and paper, you can write this down. But one of the things that you can do is try to find tiny bits of joy in your life, okay? And what I mean by this is, I'll give you an example. I was on a walk with my dog today, and I don't remember what, I was either messaging a client or listening to something, I can't remember. And as I'm walking along, I noticed my dog kind of turned, and I turned to see what he was looking at, and there was a beautiful little butterfly kind of flitting around by him. And I just paused, and I was like, oh, and I just kind of took in the butterfly, and I wanted to go like see if I could get close to it and get a picture, and it kind of flew off. But like just those tiny little experiences of joy can really help raise your vibration and help you let go of your pain identity. It doesn't have to be something major. A lot of times people think, oh, I have to do these big giant things in order to let go. No, you don't. Just practice the tiny things, right? What is it that you notice in your life that might bring you joy? And focus on that for just a few minutes. Another thing that you can do is letting go of always needing some sort of like crisis to grow. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Let me give you an example. So I once worked with a client who tended to get into intense conflicts in her romantic relationships, and every couple of months there would be like this huge blow up, threats for her or him to leave, and tears, and like these dramatic reconciliations and repairs, like just very difficult. And she told me, I always feel like those fights happen when I speak my truth. So like when I come out and say something that I really want to say, then all of a sudden there'd be like a blow up. But the pattern was that we figured this out. She'd be suppressing her needs. She'd be holding it in for months, not saying her truth. And then she would finally say her truth and explode. So this crisis, right, was giving her permission to express herself, to feel powerful, to make changes, right? So she didn't realize that she could grow or communicate without burning everything down first. So really, you have to be aware that like sometimes we believe that we have to be in crisis or something major or dramatic has to happen for change. It's like, oh, we're waiting for things to get so bad that we're forced to act, right? Like, oh my gosh, like a rock bottom situation. Why? Because in the past, the pain was what pushed us to grow or to change. But what if we didn't have to wait for everything to fall apart? What if we didn't have to wait for the house to burn down? What if we could just get that growth from curiosity, from joy in our daily interactions, and choose that instead of chaos? Okay? So that's important to make sure that, you're not always just looking for something, this like major buildup in order to find growth. You can let go of your pain identity simply, right? Like those tiny little experiences of joy, acting in ways that foster growth without needing like a healing crisis to happen. And then another one is trying to tell yourself new stories about who you are. Okay? This is the hard one because the other things are a little easier to recognize, but like the stories that live in our heads are the things that are on autopilot. But you can tell yourself a new story about anything. And a really good way to practice this is just in your everyday scenarios. So let's say that you're driving down the road and somebody's driving really slow in front of you and you're kind of in a hurry. Well, you can start telling yourself a story about that person. And we often do. This person is an idiot. This person doesn't know how to drive. This person is inconsiderate, whatever, right? We start telling ourselves these stories. We have no idea what's actually causing this person to drive slow. Maybe this person is on the tail end of a breakup. Maybe someone just died in their family and they're in a daze. Maybe their dog is in the back seat and just got home from surgery and they're trying to drive really carefully. Who knows? I don't know, right? But we tell stories. We make up stories. We make up all these stories in our head and we have no idea if they're even true. So you can notice these things about others, but it's also important to notice them about yourself. Okay? So when you start telling yourself a story about yourself, you're going to have to catch it. You're going to have to be like, oh, I did it again. Oh, what did I just tell myself? What do I believe about myself? Am I so stupid? Was I dumb for not leaving sooner? Was this really the truth? Do I need to change this? Is this something I want to keep doing in my life, right? If you don't question the stories that you tell yourself, the stories are ruling your life. I don't know about you, but I don't want these old stories running my life. I am in charge. I am the writer. I am the author of my life. I get to choose the story. I get to choose the ending. I get to choose how I want to show up, how I want to feel, who I want to be, all the things, right? But we might not do that so easily because of, like I said before, fear of letting go of that pain, fear of letting go of the struggle, fear of the unknown, all those things. And again, it's not your fault. And this stuff can be changed. This is what I help people do all the time in my programs. Okay? So try to find little experiences of joy in your life. Replace these healing crises, get rid of them, and start acting in ways like micro actions on the daily for growth. When is a growth opportunity you can take right now? You don't have to wait for the house to burn down. You don't have to wait for some crisis. You can find some way to heal now, a little opportunity in the moment. And then changing the story. You know, like the question I asked before in the journals, who would I be without my story? Start talking about that story. That's the story you want to tell yourself, not the old one, not the old painful one. And I just want you to remember this. Your story doesn't have to disappear. You don't have to let go of it. You don't have to erase it. Of course, we can't erase it. Do some of us want to? Yes. Would I love to erase mine? Sure. But also, the story can be a springboard to something even greater. And I am proof positive of that. I'm a 2 times best-selling author. I run 2 businesses. One is my coaching business. Another one is a different business that I have. I have an amazing partner in my life. I have so much joy and happiness. So, if I was still holding on to that old story, I wouldn't be in this position that I am in my life. I wouldn't be on this podcast helping you guys, right? So you don't have to erase the story. You can't erase it. It doesn't have to disappear. You don't have to turn it off or ignore it. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the ending. It can just be a story. It can just be part of your story. Maybe the first few chapters. What are the last several chapters? What do you want those to be? That's the key here, right? You are not your trauma. You are not defined by the pain and the struggles that you went through. That is key, okay? So I want you to imagine waking up in the morning but defining yourself by the dreams that you have, the passions that you have, the gifts, instead of the past. And I don't want you to get this like twisted, but you're not abandoning your story. You're just authoring new chapters. You're just saying, wow, those were pretty horrific chapters in my past. I don't want to keep reading that book over and over again. I certainly don't want to keep reading that book over and over again. Read it once. What's the next one? Everybody loves a comeback story, you know? Everybody loves a comeback story. What's your comeback story? Don't you want to have one? You get to. You get to choose it. Okay? Now, if you want to discover who you are beneath the pain, this is what I do. This is what I help people do. I bring up the subconscious beliefs and I teach you how to rewire, get them out of the way. I'd love to connect with you on this. I'd love to talk to you about it and, see if we can figure out what some of your specific root cause pain is. So you can schedule a free root cause call with me from the link in the bio, or you can check out my website. I have all the information on my website at radiate.rise.com. And I'm happy to support you through that. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I hope this episode has been helpful to you. Remember, you're not defined by your trauma, and you are somebody so much greater than that pain that you've been through. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.